Welcome to another edition of the podcast known as Blending the Family. I am your host, Tommy Maloney. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to 2021. Before we get started and talk about our guests and a few other things, my heart goes out to the city of Nashville. Christmas morning, there was a person who exploded their RV in downtown Nashville, and as somebody who used to live outside of Nashville in Cookeville, Tennessee, I was very deeply disturbed that this happened to one of the cities I dearly love. I love the state of Tennessee. I've been trying to talk my wife into moving to Tennessee. We'll cross that bridge. But anyway, to all my friends in Nashville and in Tennessee, I'm thinking of you. Always thinking of you. Like I said, I love Tennessee. Speaking of people listening to, or maybe not listening to this podcast, I just recently did a little logistics study of this podcast. So I need to thank some countries for listening to this podcast. Sure, you here in the United States are listening. Alaska. Oh my gosh, Alaska, you love me. Or I think you love me. I don't know. But I didn't realize this. We have fans in Australia, Ireland, my motherland, Bulgaria, Iran, Brazil, just to name some. So thank you for all of you in those countries listening and downloading the podcast. I am just truly honored. Oops, I need that note back. All right. Next on the list, because I have a piece of paper right here telling me things I need to remember. Please go to the website, mydadsadvicebook.com. Purchase your copy of the new book, My Dad's Advice at 5:04 a.m. It's on pre-sale order right now. And as we get closer to it being finally finished, I will let you know all that. We're close. We're very close. So again, the website to buy your for the pre-sale order is mydadsadvicebook.com. Couple new things for this year for the podcast. One thing I want to do is I want to start recommending books. I want to go out there and let people know we need to read more. I love reading. I want to share some of the books that are in my library. And if you have a book recommendation, let me know. And I would love to know it. So my first book recommendation of 2021 is by Ryan Holiday and Stephen Handelsman. I'm going to screw up that. But anyway, The Daily Stoic. 366 meditations on wisdom, perseverance, and the art of living. My mentor, one of my mentors, Liam, sent me this book, The Daily Stoic. So I'm so excited. I've already started reading it. I actually started to read it the day it arrived. So I am telling you, get The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday and Stephen Handelsman. Perfect. Also, at the end of the podcast, you're going to hear a question of the podcast. So make sure you stay to the end for that. Also, each and every month, I'm going to tell you, we have a theme for the month. In the month of January, the theme is being positive. Being positive. And I think our first guest of 2021 will really, really help you with some positivity. Even though, and you'll hear the story in this episode, he scared the bejesus out of me when I first called him to just have a chat. Lastly, I am trying to finally get my weight under control. Recently, I went out and did a stress test. And if you don't know what a stress test is, you go to your doctor's office or maybe a hospital and you go on a treadmill and they get you to get your heart rate up. So it turns out I'm okay. It's just I need more conditioning, and that's part of my goal for 2021. My first goal is by April 21st to have my weight down to between 170 and 175. So each podcast, I'm going to give you a heads up, let you know where I'm at for that. Um, so yeah, so the weight loss goal for 2021 not only is to by April 21st be down again between 170 175, but to maintain it and be good, be good. So anyway, so there you go. That's about it. I still can't believe people in other countries are listening to this podcast. I'm so excited about that. So excited about that. All right. So our first guest of 2021, bust out the bio. Justin Atherton, former detective and SWAT breacher, shares his secrets for men to achieve peak performance and regain their edge. So Justin on this podcast, oh my gosh, he brought it. He brought it. It starts off, I wanted to know more about his police background and getting in his mindset as a SWAT officer. But then we started talking about parenting, and we talked about key words that can be trigger words. And I am telling you, this podcast, I think this is a great way to start 2021. A few other things. We talk about stress. We talk about narrowing down your emotions. And again, you're going to hear 7 universal emotions that we talk about. Listening is key, and also why integrity for Justin is also very, very key and close to his heart. So again, Justin Atherton, he has a wonderful, wonderful bio. After departing the SWAT team, he launched Confidence Unchained, a company that teaches the leadership principles for men. And I'm going to tell you, this was, again, great for parenting as well. He's worked with business owners, CEOs, entrepreneurs. Again, Justin, even though in his wheelhouse it is about men, I was I was just taking so many notes after hearing this episode again and again. You can find him at confidenceunchained.com. That's confidenceunchained.com. You can also find him on LinkedIn, and that's Justin Atherton. But again, great, great episode I am going to share with you. Other than that, oh my gosh, we're finally done with 2020, that dumpster fire. Moving on to 2021. Please pick up the book. I appreciate it. Each one could be personally autographed. Could be. And one day could be worth a lot of money. So there you go. I know it's 2021, but I'm going to continue. I'm going to continue with what Terry Crews says, and that is, your success is my success. Stay to the end. Listen to the question of the podcast. Take care, everybody. And I've been really looking forward to speaking to you because this is going to give me personally time to just have some fun, learn from you, Justin, hear some stories of the times you were working in SWAT and how you took that world and turned it into a wonderful leadership coaching. So again, Justin, thank you so much for taking the time and speaking to me.
Well, yeah, Tommy, thank you for having me on the show, and I hope our conversation can give your audience some insight, some tips and tricks.
Oh, I love it. Tips and tricks. After Halloween, tips and tricks.
There you go.
I have to ask, you seem with your background, are you a very serious guy?
It depends on the context. if I'm at work, if I'm dealing with a serious situation, then yeah. But I say that, and then I think back to all the times I laugh while I'm at work. So I don't know. We shouldn't take things too serious, man. I think there's times when you need to click it into gear and be like, hey, this is a serious situation. I need to handle up. But other times it's like, man, it's not a big deal.
And as you're talking, I'm looking at the information you sent me. When it says SWAT breacher,
Hmm.
does that mean? Because the only thing I know is from growing up as a kid of the 70s, the TV show SWAT.
Sure.
The original, I'm sorry, I loved that show growing up. That was the
Yeah.
show between SWAT and the show Emergency. But there's also I don't know if it's A&E or whoever has like all the SWAT teams of Dallas, the SWAT teams of Los
Yeah.
Angeles.
I've seen the Dallas one. Yeah, I remember watching that.
Is a SWAT breacher? Does that mean you're the first one in?
No,
Okay.
it means I'm the one opening the door for the team. So my job was to open the door and as quickly as possible. Normally, my track record was the majority of the time I opened the door with one hit. There was a couple instances where it took a little bit more than that, but and I've got one story I share about that. But normally I'd be the last person in after I open the door for the team. So open the door, go ahead,
But,
guys. I'll
but
be
you were
right
the one
behind you.
with the oversized
The Ram,
the rant. Okay, thank you.
yeah.
So that was you. You technically were the first one, but as you
Mhm.
call it, you're just hey, I'm just knocking on the door. Hi, housekeeping.
Yeah, knock knock.
Yeah. How do you prepare yourself? Each in those situations. I mean, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, you really must have become a Zen Buddhist right before you know the knock knock part.
It's interesting because I think back to it, and I've been reading this book recently called The Rise of Superman, which talks about flow states. And I think back to those moments, you know, riding on the truck, on the way to someone's house or a business, about to serve this search warrant. And you got to amp yourself up. You got to be ready for all the unknowns because we don't know exactly what's going on. We have a vague overview of what's happening, maybe a vague outline of the environment that we're about to go into. But the flow state, that high, like that high adrenaline state, starts the minute you jump off the truck, and everything turns into slow motion. A little bit of auditory exclusion, a little bit of tunnel vision comes in, but that's when the training kicks in, and it's this hyper awareness state um, that I've seen people not be able to handle. You have to prepare for this. You have to mentally prepare for that stress that's going to hit you, because I've seen people run off the truck and go to the wrong house because they got that super tunnel vision, and their body and their mind, they weren't able to handle that high stress, on a regular basis. So yeah, you really have to mentally prepare for it so you can allow your training to kick in those type of moments.
So when you say auditory exclusion, are you saying essentially just tuning everything out and just focusing on one thing? And that one thing is, in your situation, Justin, your job, getting the RAM. Is that what you mean by auditory exclusion?
So I mean that there's a physiological response that happens when stress goes that high. You don't hear everything.
Mm.
It's in our fight and flight response. It's hearing things is not necessarily a necessity. And so you tend to not hear what's going on around you, but your vision is hyper focused. So it's an interesting physiological response that actually happens in the body when you go into a super high stress mode.
When you're talking about some of your colleagues possibly have gone to the wrong house, the first
Mhm.
thing that came to my mind, there was a story back when Laurel and Hardy were making movies, they trashed the wrong house. And that's what first popped in my head. Sorry, wrong house.
Yeah, and yeah, just thinking back to that, that was a safety issue. I don't think that that person belonged on the team. Shortly after that, they were asked to leave the team because there was repeated issues, and I really just think it was a lack of training or a lack of mental preparedness to handle the high stress of those environments.
So, what do you feel personally made you different than, let's say, that former colleague?
I think a lot of and we call it mental blueprinting. So you have to own the fear and the anxiety that comes up. You can't fight it. There's a lot of emotional intelligence that comes into stressful or high emotion situations. And when you fight against those emotions that are coming up, all they do is push back at you harder, and then your body and your mind are not in sync. When you own the emotions that come up, I know, like, I was anxious coming up to the house, like riding in the back of that truck. I'm like, all right, I'm worried that there may be more suspects than we expected. I have to, own all of those emotions that come up, before the incident. So when I'm in it, it's like my mind and body are working well together because I'm accepting the emotions that are coming up because they are legitimate possibilities, rather than saying like, oh, I don't want to be scared, I don't want to be angry, I don't want to be sad. Then your mind and body aren't really in sync, because emotions really are a physiological response to your environment. That's not just a fleeting thought.
When you were on the SWAT team, and it's like you said, there's high emotion, and I'm sure there's also a lot of testosterone
Sure.
within that group. After, let's after one of your, um, the only thing I'm probably using the wrong terminology, and I
SWAT call
apologize.
out.
Sure, there you go. When you guys go back, let's say you go back to your station or what
Mhm.
have you, are there? I know there's probably debrief, but is
Yeah.
there also just you guys just sitting around and going, "Holy crap! I was scared out of my wits," or having open and honest dialogue, or is the testosterone just too high where in that environment you're not going to share your feelings with your fellow officer?
Yeah, I maybe not to the extent of saying like I'm scared. Like I don't think I ever heard anybody on the team say, "Oh, I was scared when I entered that room," because that's definitely not something you want to express. And a high level fear can be paralyzing rather than motivating. Um, but there probably wasn't a lot of talk around emotions. It was more tactics and debriefs and, hey, what was going on here, and this is what I thought was going on, and this is what I saw. So it was more the tactical side. Um, so the emotion side really didn't come in for me until I started teaching interview classes and leadership classes within law enforcement, and so that was a different tool all by itself. Do I think that that emotional awareness, emotional fortitude could help all those guys on the team and basically everyone else out there that's listening right now? Yes. Um, I wouldn't blame it on the too much testosterone. I just think that that's a byproduct of our society and how men are told that emotions are bad. Don't talk about emotions.
Right. And, as parents, as dads, you know, as I'm talking to you, I'm looking. I have a picture of my son almost staring right at me, and one of the things, the generalization is your kid falls down, especially if it's a boy. Get up, rub some dirt on it, or I'll give you something to cry about. Do you feel that since you've somewhat come out of law enforcement, that there's been a change in the tides as far as, and let me maybe rephrase this. I'm not looking at what's has been happening in our society. I'm more focused and funneled down to, do you feel that there are some men within law enforcement that have maybe a little bit more, I don't know, kinder heart than others, or because of law enforcement, because of the high stress, um, you know, you go to a call, you don't know the outcome. Does
Mhm.
that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and it because part of it is a culture thing, right? A subculture, being in police work and having that persona, and not because there's certain situations where it's not appropriate to show your emotions or to sympathize with, either a victim or a suspect. But it's good to show empathy, which is very different than sympathy. It's something that we teach in our classes. Um, but I think there is a pendulum swing, as far as emotions, but it can, I think it can go outside of law enforcement. And I think maybe right now the pendulum swing is so far in the other direction to where it's like my feelings matter more than anything else. My feelings matter more than facts. My feelings matter more than what's actually going on in the situation. Kind of the whole, everybody needs a participation ribbon because you're going to hurt everyone's feelings that didn't get first or second place. So I don't think that that's appropriate either. So there's um it's about understanding your emotions and not letting them run you. So that I think it's bad to show zero emotions, and it's also bad to allow your emotions to run your behavior.
I have to laugh because uh, all three of our kids have played sports.
Mm.
And when you do see those, here's your participation medal, it's like, really? Come on.
Yeah, I, I grew up when it was like, hey, first, second, third was it, and
Exactly.
even second and third, you're like, dang it, we didn't win. So and if you were fourth, I remember when they started introducing like fourth place, it was like what they call it, like runner up, or like they had terms for it, and I remember thinking like, this is crap.
And
Nobody
it's
wants a
true.
fourth place ribbon. A fourth place doesn't mean anything, but
No.
now they're given 10th and 11th place, so they don't hurt anybody's feelings. So it's
Yeah,
it's a weird time to live in, Tommy.
it is, Justin. And on a side note, I after my divorce, it's just, essentially my son and I. So I'm used to, him playing baseball and hockey, and then when I got remarried, my wife's daughters were in gymnastics,
Mm,
and talk about pretty much everybody getting some type of ribbon. It's like, come on, come on.
sure. Sure.
Yeah, I don't miss those days.
Yeah.
Tell me about why integrity means so
Mhm.
much to you.
Yeah, that's one of the big things that I push out to my clients. I believe that a lack of integrity is contagious. And so when I talk about that, it's really, we all have that one area of our life that is out of alignment in some form that we just let slack behind. and that can always creep into the other aspects of our life. So the three pillars that I teach on are mental toughness, emotional fortitude, and health awareness. And the majority of the time, what I see with like CEOs or business owners, entrepreneurs, they let their health slide. And what happens when they do that, there's different byproducts of that. So they don't have enough energy, so that creeps into like, their mental toughness, or their ability to handle emotionally charged situations. When you're tired, when you're run down, well, now you've spent all your energy at work throughout the day. Now you come home and you're tired, and maybe you bark at your family and let them have the brunt of your emotional baggage for the day. So when you have one area out of alignment, it really does creep into other areas of your life. So it's super important to be in integrity in all areas of your life, and do what you say you're going to do just because you said it, for no other reason. Um, which that kind of goes into also saying no to people. Don't just say yes just to make them feel good. If you can't do something, or if you don't want to do something, hey, no, I'm gonna decline your invitation for that. But that's keeping the integrity with yourself also, knowing you're not going to take on too many things onto your plate, because something eventually is going to fall off.
Yeah, I remember years ago, Zig Ziglar talked about calling it kicking the cat. So somebody, was already mad. They got somebody else mad. They got you mad. You come home, like you were saying, and you end up kicking the cat.
Hmm.
Um, one thing I started to think about as you were talking, how can, your program with the three pillars, mental toughness, emotional fortitude, and health awareness, how can we, with your pillars, help dads out there so they're not coming home, that they're not taking it out on their kids? And
Yeah,
um, you know eh, eh, right before we recorded, we talked about, you know the way of the world is definitely different. I mean, there's no book on how to get through what's going on in our world right now.
no, there's
And
not.
so how can you help other both men slash dads
Sure.
get through their own three pillars?
Yeah, I think the most important is your emotional fortitude, because your ability to handle the emotions that come up really does affect every aspect of your life. And there is one tool in particular that I teach called the emotional matrix. And this, in sense, is a way to build your emotional vocabulary, so you can quickly process out like the bad meeting you had today, the bad conversation you had, maybe an argument you had with somebody. You can quickly process out those emotions, so you don't bring all that home with you in your emotional backpack and then release it on your family. And then, vice versa. If you had an argument with the wife, now you're bringing it to your meeting at 8 a.m. the next day. So it does transition back and forth. And really, this is the most profound tool that I found. I actually help teach this to my daughter some, because my daughter's 9 years old, and there's nowhere in school are they teaching to have an emotional vocabulary.
True.
It's not out there. But this is the most important thing. Like, you have to be able to specifically identify the emotions that come up, so you can get rid of them, or else you're just going to hang on to them for a week, a month, a decade, 30 years, depending on the incident that happens.
Yeah, I will admit I was very much guilty of that when after I got divorced,
Mm,
because one of the things that I did was I hung on to that emotion. I hung on to just keeping inside and not admitting. And this is why I'm so happy to have you on here, Justin, is because this is where how do I don't want to just, I'm just going to say it. This is where a lot of us men just, we hold it in,
Mhm.
We're afraid to share something with, another man saying, Justin, I'm going through a divorce. I'm hurting. Would you be willing to just sit down and talk with me? And I'm hoping that, and it does seem that we are getting away from that.
Mhm.
But what would you say? How could your program help somebody like that? Like, again, going through divorce. I don't know how to reach out to somebody. What can you say to that man today to help them power through it?
Yeah, really, this tool, it allows you to work it out with yourself. Now, it's great to have someone else that's well versed in this to be able to bounce these ideas off of, or to help give you that emotional vocabulary. But really, what this tool does, and I'll explain it more so you get an understanding. So the emotional matrix is based off the 7 universal emotions that are expressed in the face, and this is based off of Dr. Paul Ekman's work, within micro expressions. And that's a complete different conversation we can have. But the emotional
Mhm.
matrix is based off of that. So the 7 emotions are happiness, sadness, fear, anger, disgust, contempt, and surprise.
Hold on. All right. Happiness or happy,
Hmm. Sad.
sadness or
Hmm.
sad, and then sadness.
Yeah. So happy, sad, fear,
Okay.
anger,
Anger,
disgust, contempt, and surprise.
disgust. Hold on. What was after disgust?
Contempt,
Contempt,
and then surprise.
and then surprise. Okay.
So those are the 7 universal emotions, and you can think about those as the umbrella emotions, because each of those emotions we feel in a different intensity level. So we can say high, medium, and low. So if I gave you an example of, so within anger, I could be furious, which would be a high level, intensity for anger. You could be annoyed, which would be a moderate intensity. So all 3 of those emotions are under the umbrella of anger. Just like happiness, you could be excited, you could be joyful, and then you could be pleased. 3 different intensity levels under the same umbrella emotion. And each one is going to have a specific reason that it comes up. And so the emotional matrix card is full with numerous words in each category. Because what we do with our students, we normally give them a card with the 7 universal emotions on the left, and then blank areas all under the high, medium, and low intensity. And we tell them, hey, fill out as many emotional words as you can. And we give them about 5 minutes. And normally what happens is they write down like 3 or 5, because that's the extent of our emotional vocabulary. And sometimes I'll even write down words that aren't emotional words, like frustrated. How many times have you heard someone say that they're feeling frustrated?
Right.
So frustration is a combination of emotions. It's like trying to use a shotgun to pinpoint your emotions. It's not going to work, because you could be fearful and angry, you could be disgusted and contemptuous. Like it's combinations. You need to get laser focused when identifying your emotions, which will help you process them out. So this tool helps in that process.
Well, I think you're on to something because you're changing your mindset at the
Mm-hmm.
same time. And I as you're talking about these 7 universal emotions, I'm somebody else, and I don't know if it was another podcast or what, was talking something about this very similar, and they talked about the word bothered and
Mm-hmm.
how funny the word bothered is. And if you can change your mindset to, sure, you're frustrated, again, depending on the situation where the word frustration and frustrated are going to be a part of. But if you can change your mindset to go, huh, I'm frustrated, but I see a little bit, and this is my wacky world, a little bit of the humor why I'm frustrated. We
Mhm.
have a puppy in our house. I get frustrated with him, but I have to remind myself, Justin, he's a puppy.
Yeah. And if you broke down frustrated, you would find the specific words that would come up for it and the reasons behind them. Because frustrated isn't going to get you to the root. But if you said like I'm bothered and I'm bothered because, he peed in the corner,
Right.
or I'm worried, that he's going to do it again. Like our emotions are all connected to specific reasons based on the context of what's going on. So if you get rid of the word frustrated and actually get down to the root words of what is actually happening, like what am I feeling? And then ask yourself why? Why am I bothered? You'll get that answer. Oh, I'm bothered because of this, or I'm worried because of this. I'm anxious because of this. So it's important to get laser focused when identifying your emotions. And what's funny is, so I have this card and I use it for myself, especially when I'm feeling stuck. I know there's like some emotions in there that I'm like, I'm bothered, but I need to pinpoint it, right?
Right.
And what's funny is, and I wish I knew why it worked like this. I wish I knew the science behind this, but scanning over the card, like going through each word, one will stick out to you. And you go, "Oh, that word. I feel dejected." Why? Why do I feel dejected? And you sit there with that for a minute and go, "Oh, it's because of this." And then you get to look at that reason and go, "Okay, can I affect some change in that matter? Do I have to, or can I remove myself from the situation, or do I have to accept it?" Those are the three levels. It's one of those three. There's nothing else. We can either change it, we can remove ourselves from the situation, or we have to accept it. And then you can move on.
Can you give us an example of that? Either something that you learned from yourself doing it or maybe one of your coaching clients?
Sure. So I use it on myself quite frequently, and normally, like in a normal incident, like 5 to 10 emotional words will come up, and I'll be able to figure out why. One of the one of the last conversations I had with my ex-wife, I wrote down 34 different emotions that came up from that conversation. That's my record.
Uh,
34.
so do you want to break that record one time?
I don't want to.
No.
I'm not looking to break that record. If I can kind of, trim that down. And obviously in that type of context, there's going to be other conversations that come into mind or other events that happened. But I went through all 34 emotions that I wrote down, because this is what I tell my clients to do. Write them all down first. So just write down that list. And then you go back to number one after you've exhausted your list. You go back to number one and you're like, why am I feeling like this?
Mhm.
Okay. Next one. Why am I feeling like this? And it breaks down, and it shows you that some of the emotions that come up are just BS. It's like,
Yeah,
I'm just worried about this little tiny thing here. Oh, okay. Never mind. I can't do anything about that aspect. There might be some things that you can change. Hey, I'm worried that this might happen. And you go, can I change it? Yeah. Okay. So what can I do to change this so I'm not worried about it anymore? So it's very important to go through and do this on a regular basis with yourself. And what's funny about this is you can use this on an incident that happened 5 years ago, 30 years ago, and put yourself back in that mindset of that moment and go, what emotions, was I feeling then? Because we all have those moments in our life when we look back and you still get that emotional, charge. Because what's funny about our brain doesn't understand the difference between something happening right now and us thinking about something.
exactly.
So we can think about the past moment, and our body will still give us those emotions, or we can imagine a future moment and our body will still give us those emotions. I know that, in planning for different SWAT calls or different scenarios, doing that mental blueprinting, like thinking about maybe a fight that could take place or something that would need to happen, I feel that level of anger or fear, and I'm like, whoa. I'm just thinking about this, and it's triggering these emotions. And so it's our brain is a funny thing.
Well, I look at the Stoics, and the Stoics talk a lot about we put worst case scenario in our mind,
Mhm.
and then when it comes to reality, whatever we put in our mind didn't come through.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, gosh, maybe 3 years ago, my bonus daughter Becca, she was going through the time where anytime she was driving with somebody, she had to record her hours and then turn it in.
Hmm.
And she came home in a panic. She couldn't find this piece of paper. And I'm like, okay, what is the worst case scenario here? What happens if you don't have this paperwork? And
Hmm.
she's bawling, Justin. And again, I'm used to raising a boy, and when girls start crying around me, I don't know how to handle it, other
Sure.
than running into my own corner and probably peeing in the corner too with the dog. But again said, what's the worst case scenario? What will print out another copy? Okay. So nobody's gonna die, right? Well, so nobody's gonna right? Okay. That weekend, she found it, and I'm like, do you remember how you put the worst case scenario in your head? I hope you remember that time
It
going
would have been
forward.
interesting to see if she was able to get to the specific emotions. Like, what is she worried about? Would it have been
Mhm.
like some type of shame or like disappointment or like all the specific emotions that came up for her in that? Because obviously there was a lot of emotions. It would have been interesting for her to get to the root of it and then herself realize, oh, that's not a big deal. I'm disappointed in myself for losing it. I'm worried that my teacher will be mad at me. Like whatever those reasons are behind those emotions, once you say it out loud or like acknowledge it to yourself, you can almost laugh and go, oh, what the heck was I so upset about?
Does
But
that
it's
go with
about
the 34 emotional words for you too, Justin?
It does. It does. Eventually I had to go through and sure, there were still some things that are like, okay, hey, I'm worried about this. I'm anxious about this and this conversation or how this is going to go in the future. So obviously there were still some things that weren't resolved after that day, but I was able to release the majority of the 34 emotions from that conversation to where I wasn't just in this emotional turmoil to where I couldn't function for the rest of the day. Because that's not good. Like I'm not going to take that out on my new spouse. I'm not going to take it out on my daughter or whoever ends up being around me because I have these 34 emotions like attacking me and I'm not able to process them. As long as you can get the majority of them processed out and go, okay, hey, I'm good. Now I can function. Now not going to take this out on the next person I come across.
Well, and that is you nailed on the head as far as a family goes, or again parenting. Like you're saying to me, it would have been nice if we could have just said to Becca, all right, what's the root cause?
Hmm.
And when you do have your kids and they are at the point where you can't understand a word they're saying because they're so emotionally charged, but that's brilliant. Just okay, let's calm down, but let's focus. What is
See,
causing
be
this?
careful. Be careful saying calm. So that's something that we're so used to is when you come across someone that's emotional, telling them to calm down. That is
Mm.
calm is not the emotion that they are feeling. And so what's what we talk about is helping someone, and this is really prevalent with your kids because as parents we need to be able to help them with their emotional vocabulary So rather than saying calm down, which never works,
Right.
you say, hey, it seems like you're disappointed about this, or it seems like you're a little worried about losing your project. And so, and what I always say to do is guess low, because high, medium, and low intensity, right? You never want to guess high. It seems like you're heartbroken about losing this. You give them some leeway. If you guess low, then and they correct it, then they've pinpointed it. Because you may have gone to your daughter and be like, hey, it seems like you're a little anxious about losing this paper. She's like, no, I'm not anxious, I'm terrified that this is going to happen, or that my teacher is going to fail me, or I'm fearful that I'm not going to be able to find it, and then I have to redo all the work. So you kind of prod a little bit by giving them an emotional word, and you have to do it in a way to where, you notice I said it seems like,
Right.
because if you don't want to tell someone you are mad, you are annoyed, I know you're feeling this way, you want to give yourself a way out to be wrong. So
I,
it seems like.
yeah, I like how you said, aim low,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and not try, as my wife would say to me, quit trying to fix things.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I've heard that phrase one too many times, and I think I finally learned, Justin, not to try and fix things, but
Mm-hmm.
I like that phrasing. Again, aim low and use it seems like. I Oh my gosh, you just open up my eyes to parenting and marriage counseling stuff 101. I am so thrilled. I think you just saved a bunch of marriages right here and now, Justin.
I hope so. I hope so. It's but it's super important to understand, but you have to have this skill yourself. So, you have to learn about your own emotional vocabulary so you can give it to other people in those moments. Whether it's your kids, whether it's your spouse, you go, hey, you seem a little annoyed about what's going on here, or about our conversation. And they may come back and go, I'm not annoyed, I'm raging because of this, that, and the other. You're like, okay, all right, well, now we've pinpointed the reasons for the emotions. And it may be something completely off the scale. I don't know how many interviews I've done where I've said that to someone. I'm like, hey, you seem a little disappointed about this, which is under the realm of sadness, because I thought that they were sad. And they're like, no, I'm worried about this. So they completely went into the fear category instead. And I was like, oh, okay. I would have never thought that this would have triggered fear instead of sadness. So it allows them to use their own emotional vocabulary to correct you, and then it helps them pinpoint those emotions. And the beautiful thing is, once you pinpoint those emotions, they calm down because they're releasing that emotion. And so pinpointing the emotions exactly is like this emotional dump. It gives them this emotional release. And I feel it for myself when I read over this card and there's a word that really hits home to how I'm feeling. It's like I had this like deep breath, like sigh, like, yeah, that was it. That's what I needed to get rid of. And in a way, you are calming them down without telling them to calm down.
I'm thinking too, you can reverse engineer this as well. And here's
Okay.
what I mean by that, Justin. Instead of looking at the situation where the person is in a stressful, if they're in a happy,
Hmm.
you can say to them, it seems like you're happy. No,
Yeah.
I'm ecstatic. Well, why are
Yeah.
you ecstatic? I
I do that to my daughter. I tell her that. I'm like, why are you such a happy girl? Why are you so happy? And she's like, oh, because of this or this. And it actually boosts their mood. So yeah, I've played with that as well, because we're so we're so used to focusing on what society calls negative emotions that we
Mhm.
we hardly ever recognize happiness or a positive emotional state. And so I have made that point with my daughter to point out when she is in a happy state, and also letting her know that she has control over that. Like you can basically make yourself happy at any point that you really want to. It's about changing your mindset about it. But yeah,
Exactly.
I think that was something that I've been playing with myself, when interacting with my daughter, and boosting her happy her happy moments. But within that, what I also talk to my clients about is, you look at that list of emotions that I gave you, those 7 universal emotions, and I think that the majority of people would say, well, there's 6 bad ones and 1 good one. And what I really talk about is there is no such thing as a good or bad emotion. Emotions are either useful or not useful based on the context of the situation. And that can be tough for some people to understand, because you think about, if you're getting mugged on the side of the road, what emotions are going to kick in? That fear, anger is going to help you fight off your attacker and run away. So in that moment, fear and anger are useful emotions. It's probably not very useful to be happy and laughing in the back row of a funeral. It's a good emotion, quote unquote, right? But it's not useful in the context of that environment. So I think it's really important to understand that there are no such thing as good or bad emotions. They are just useful or not useful.
I remember the movie Kung Fu Panda, where one of the characters was talking to another one and saying, Master, Master, I have bad news. There's no good or bad. It's just news. I'm like,
Hmm.
that kind of makes sense. Again, talking about emotions, um, that going back to, understanding, it's, I guess, I don't know what to call it. It's not a fad, but, a couple's talking about their love languages. You probably need to understand your emotional language as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's super important. And yeah, the love language is a whole different topic, but I do enjoy that as well. Like how people, take their gratitude, or whether it's physical touch or personal time. I think that's very important, for relationships, but definitely understanding your own emotional vocabulary and understanding other people's, because there's steps to this. Once you get proficient in your own emotional vocabulary, that's when you can start helping others with theirs, and understanding other people and helping them recover from their emotional incidents. I practice this with my daughter all the time, and there is there resistance to it, yes, because we're not super comfortable talking about our emotions openly, and it does bring up certain things, like, it may, you know kind of bring back up that emotion, the way maybe someone gets emotional or teary-eyed a little bit, or a little worried about just thinking about this, but that's because they haven't processed it out yet. And so helping that person coax out those emotions and letting them understand, hey, if you don't talk about this, if you don't identify these emotions, you're going to carry this around with you for months or years, and hopefully not decades.
Well, and I think along those lines too, Justin, it started off, you know, trying to, in my mind, having you on this podcast because helping other men,
Mhm.
and that's where I am. I, after speaking to you, a few weeks ago, all I kept thinking was Justin's message, Justin's program can help so many men get through that emotional baggage because I'm afraid, looking at, for example, you know, looking at men's statistics when it comes to suicide, because a lot of it could be just something as simple as understanding, why am I going through this?
Yeah.
What is triggering this? And how can I get through this?
Well, what's bad about that is, and I think it is a contributing factor to the high suicide rate for men, is I remember thinking this as a young man, and I know that there's men out there that feel the same way. I remember thinking if I ever let sadness or fear or anger slip out of me, then I was weak.
Mm.
I was like, because I wanted complete and full control over my emotions. And if ever one slipped out, I was mad at myself. I was like, damn it, I messed up. I let that one slip out. I lost control. I'm weak. Whatever that negative self talk starts kicking in, right? Because I didn't understand the science behind emotions. Now I laugh. I laugh at my old self going, man, you were dumb. You were just ignorant because we don't have control over the emotions that come up in our body. Like, I want everyone to be very aware of this. You have zero control over the emotions that come up in your body. What you can control are the reactions to your emotions. And also, emotions are different than feelings. The emotions are the involuntary, subconscious, physiological response to your environment. Your feelings are your thoughts about your emotions. Clear difference.
So looking back on your career, Justin, what was your aha moment of putting your business together, your coaching practice together? What was it, something that you were missing in your life? What was that breakthrough moment for you?
Well, for me, I was always involved in training, being a field training officer, being a supervisor. That was always something that I was involved in and passionate about. And so for me, it wasn't that something was missing. It was like, how can I have, a greater impact? Like, how can I was like, once I started learning these tools, once I started working with this company that teaches the emotional intelligence and the leadership and interview skills, I was like, man, how could I not share this with everyone? And so that's when I developed my program, and now I use a lot of law enforcement tools that have been tweaked into being personal development tools. So we teach this emotional matrix in our interview classes, in how to help. First it's on yourself, like understanding yourself, but it's also focused on victims of crime or witnesses that we need to talk to, or even talking to suspects, because building that rapport with someone is important, but it's an emotional skill. It's not an intellectual skill. So and that's something hard for some people to wrap their brains around. But so it was an easy transition for me to go, I want to share this with as many people as possible.
Does your daughter know that her dad is coaching her on a daily basis? And at the age of 18, are you going to give her a bill for all the coaching you've done?
I'm training her to be a future badass.
I love it.
I I tell people this on a regular basis, that her future boyfriends don't stand a chance, because
I'm going to stop you right there, and I'm going to tell the audience this. I called Justin to set up a time for us to just talk, and when Justin answered the phone, I felt all the Catholic guilt in me came out, because when Justin answered the phone, ladies and gentlemen, I was scared to death. So, to your daughter's future boyfriends, they're screwed. They're so screwed with you as her dad.
but you know what? It won't be a purposeful intimidation factor, because the reason that her future boyfriends aren't going to stand a chance is her, because I'm training her to have a strong emotional vocabulary, and also to detect deception. Yeah, I think, what, and this is another aspect of what I teach. It's not part of my coaching program with men, but I do teach my daughter how to detect deception, and she probably does better than some of the law enforcement officers that I've taught, as far as picking up on micro expressions in the face. So I'm waiting for that call one day when her mom goes, "Hey, she just told me I was a liar," and I'll say, "Well, just stop lying to her, and it'll be fine."
Or just tell
I,
her you have the right to remain silent.
yeah.
Anything you say,
But yeah, I definitely use this on my daughter. And the funny thing for me is my daughter knows that, you know, I tell her the truth. Like we have very open, like I tell her, look, I'm going to be honest with you, and I expect you to be honest with me as well. And I've caught her a couple times to where she starts to lie, realizes she's talking to me, and goes, okay, this is what happened.
yeah.
And so, my idea for her is to, give her all of this knowledge that I wish I had as a kid, that would have saved me a lot of trouble, would have saved me a lot of heartache and disappointments at a young age, and give her those tools to create herself into being a badass and be able to do whatever she wants to do.
I just read an article. Matthew McConaughey, um, he has a new book out, and so he's hitting all the talk shows and all that. But one of the things he talked about recently in an article was about the biggest and number one rule in their household is no lying.
Mm,
And especially with kids, it's not always that easy, but it's exactly what you're saying, Justin. If you tell your kids, sit down, have those conversations, no lying, that no matter what it is, and having that open dialogue, you're building such a great foundation for them as parent child,
mhm.
but also the life lessons they're going to take away from having that again a positive environment within that household.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's super important to establish that, and so for their future relationships, that they don't put up with that, and that they don't contribute to that as well.
Exactly.
So it comes at it from both sides.
Justin, how can the audience get a hold of you and your program?
Yeah, the best way to get a hold of me is on my website, which is confidenceunchained.com. I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook under Confidence Unchained, or also just with my name, Justin Atherton. Um, yeah, those are the best ways to get a hold of me. And I've got an event coming up here in January that your audience may be interested in getting into, which is it's a virtual summit called Men Sharpening Men.
Ooh,
And so been putting that together these last couple months, and I'm excited to see it come to fruition. We're looking to have it come out here the end of January, latest beginning of February.
okay. Keep me posted so we can add that information not only in the show notes, Justin, but
Definitely
through the social media. All right, Justin. So you are the first guest of 2021. Welcome to 2021.
excited to be here. I'm sure everyone else is as well.
Exactly. So I always end the program with one last question, and since this is a new year, there's a new question, and you're going to be the first victim when it comes to this new question. So you ready, Justin?
I'm ready, Tommy.
All right, Justin. If you could step into my shoes, what would you have asked yourself that I didn't?
Hmm. Well, that is an interesting perception shift. What would I have asked me? Um, I think you did a great job hitting all the notes. I, man, Tommy, you got me stumped. Let's say, I would have asked, what advice I would have given myself, 5 or 10 years ago, that would
Ah,
have made a difference.
I'm going to write that down.
Because I really think, like, a lot of the coaches and consultants out there that I've talked to, their perfect client is themselves 5, 10 years ago.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And so it's like, man, I wish I had this information 5, 10 years ago. I wish I knew this. I wish I had this piece of advice. So that's what I've seen from most of the coaches and consultants that I've spoken to, that their perfect client is themselves, 5 to 10 years ago.
Do you want to mention your podcast too?
Sure. Yeah, my podcast I do with my cousin Paul Fortune. It's called Actions and Limits, and that's out on all the normal podcast platforms. And we actually are on YouTube as well, so you can see our smiling faces there on Actions and Limits. But yeah, we get to interview a lot of great people on the show, and we've been doing that podcast for over a year, putting out an episode every Monday, and we've come across a lot of great people on there. So
I love talking to fellow podcasters because it's just easy peasy.
sure, yeah, we've had several podcasters on our show, and Tommy, you'd be welcome to come on our show as well. We do record video. I know you said you're not big on the video, but we do put the video out there for our audience that enjoys the YouTube aspect. But they're easier guests because you're used to talking. It's just a normal conversation. It's just, hey, I love this aspect because I don't have to do any of the editing.
I know. This week I'm on 2 other podcasts as a guest, and I was thinking the same thing. I'm going, now you can send me the audio. That'd be great.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. It's nice to have the tables turned from time to time.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm glad you had me on the show, Tommy. I appreciate being here and sharing with your audience, and I hope they got some good insight from our conversation.
I know I did, and I did learn. The big thing is called a RAM.
Yeah. Yes, the big metal tube is called the RAM. And actually, I forgot, I was going to share something with you and your audience.
Yeah, go ahead.
If they go on my website, you can actually download the emotional matrix.
Oh,
And if you use the code confidence1, so the number 1, you guys can download it for free.
confidence, the number 1. So confidence 1.
Sir.
Awesome.
So they can have the emotional matrix, and you can go over it and use it at will. And hopefully that helps you and your audience and whoever else needs that tool. I think it's a tool that needs to be shared with everybody.
I am 100% with you, and that's why I was so excited to have this conversation with you, Justin, because I know you'd bring it. I knew. See, you brought the RAM with you.
The proverbial RAM, right?
The proverbial RAM.
Yes, sir.
Didn't I tell you? Justin brought it. He brought it. Question of the podcast. Do you like pie or cake? Pie or cake?